Okay, great. Thank you, Joe. All right, let me go ahead and get my screen shared with you all. You'd think after doing this for so long it would be easy, and all the time I find myself getting flustered over sharing my screen. Can everyone see my title slide?
Yes.
Great. Perfect. Thank you. So I want to start off. Thank you, everyone, for taking your time today to listen to me talk to you all about how managing people is both an art and a science. As Joe mentioned, my name is Janice Camacho. I am a project manager here at Atten Design Group. I've been with the company just shy of 2 years, but I've been practicing project management in some form for the past 9 years. Before we dive in, I do want to talk a little bit about Atten. We are a full service digital agency. We have been helping partners overcome ineffective technology and design for 20 years through award winning user engagement strategy, responsive and accessible website design, and open source development, primarily with Drupal, but we also work in WordPress, React, and Gatsby. We were founded to serve mission-driven organizations and have launched successful campaigns with partners such as Human Rights Watch, Stanford University, and the Guttmacher Institute. Basically, we're in the business of doing work that matters with companies who do good. So now I want to dive into why we are all here today. As a project manager, I'm often tasked with managing client schedules, timelines, meetings, tasks, and recaps. However, the most complex and difficult deliverables I'm responsible for every day is managing people. And from there, I'm managing their schedules, timelines, meetings, tasks, and recaps. You get the idea. I bet I know what you're thinking. That sounds tough. And you know what? You're not wrong. But as the type A, daughter of military parents, obsessively compulsive human that I am, I relish in it. I thrive in situations that are complex and thoroughly enjoy finding solutions that can be applied again and again. Managing people is no exception. My role is not one that is always easy. However, having navigated a wide range of situations, I feel as though I have figured out a way to manage people that combines the art of the individual and meeting them where they're most comfortable with some science behind why they're comfortable there. In the professional world, it is pretty much a guarantee that you're going to have to work with people. So my hope is that you will take the information you learned here and be able to execute it in your own situations with the intent to come out successful on the other side, even if those situations are tough. Now, I'm no expert in people. I'm not a psychologist and I don't have any sort of degree in behavioral science. It's quite opposite, actually. My background is in marketing, management, and project management, and I've made it a point to keep it very focused. With that, in starting this journey, the journey to better manage my peers, I knew I was going to need some insights that would aid in backing up the way I've been able to work with others. How could I teach others how to do what I've been so successful in doing? So I began my quest, and I started where anyone who lives and breathes the internet goes: Yahoo. Jokes aside, I wanted to know what others thought of the subject. What does it mean to be a successful people manager? How do I go about it? What makes people tick? Where can I find the holy grail of information that gives me all of the answers? Yeah, definitely Yahoo. So I began my search. I tried to find out which factors go into managing individuals and how we can learn to be able to do so in the most effective manner. And as it turns out, on the most powerful search engine in the world, I found two very different ends of the spectrum. I found job descriptions for HR roles, so maybe a career switch, or pages upon pages upon pages of research papers going into the psychological aspect of managing a team. And while both of these are well and good in their own regard, that wasn't it. I needed something in the middle. So I did what any good late 20-something millennial does. I made it up. No, I took this as an opportunity to look inward to my own experience, not only as a person who's been managed at various lengths, but as someone who's had to manage people and projects alike for the entire duration of my career. What have my own experiences been like? How have I been managed the best? Who was my worst manager? What made them that way? And then I found it. I had my aha moment. It was staring at me in the face right there in my own experience. Managing people is both an art and a science. Merging the HR descriptions with the research. Great people management combines both the art of understanding, empathy, communication, acknowledgement, with the science that researchers and authors like Catherine Briggs, Isabel Briggs Myers, and Tom Rath gave us. It is neither one nor the other, but rather a combination. And sometimes it's not an equal balance, which as a Libra is very difficult for me to wrap my head around. However, both are necessary in some regard when managing individuals who do the work to keep our clients happy. But why is this important? What can you do to manage individuals and teams successfully? Why should you want to take steps to ensure longevity of the teams you build and subsequently the projects they produce? Because as long as you work with people, you will need to know how to work with people. So first things first, let's talk about how art fits into this. According to dictionary.com, art is defined as the quality, production, expression, or realm according to aesthetic principles of what is beautiful, appealing, or of more than ordinary significance. However, I wouldn't say this is one-to-one with an artistic approach to managerial interaction. How do we relate this to people? So there are those that I mentioned earlier: empathy, understanding, acknowledgement, communication. But then there are those that we don't necessarily think of when approaching the subject: patience, support, compassion, problem solving, adaptability. And when looking at these, we're not simply looking to understand the words and what they mean. We need to look at how, as a manager, you adapt them based on how those you are managing will receive them. Second, let's take a little dive into the science aspect of this all. Again, according to dictionary.com, science is defined as a particular branch of knowledge. So a little more in line with what we're going for, but what do we need to know about people to be successful in managing them? So there are numerous widely respected and popular personality and emotional intelligence tests, which aid in identifying who an individual is, their strengths and weaknesses, preferred communication styles, how they view the world, and perceptions of that person. Who a person is has a direct impact on their performance. Therefore, by basing a professional relationship around accurate understanding of test results, we are empowered to manage said relationships in the best way possible. So let's dive a little bit deeper into two of the personality tests outlined. The first is 16 personalities, based on a series of 60 questions that takes no more than 12 minutes, their words, not mine, aimed at identifying what drives, inspires, and worries different personality types. The result is a 5-letter acronym, hence the name Big Five, which, when combined, define the personality type of the user. Each letter describes a specific trait, with the combinations forming types and type groups. There are 16 total personality possibilities, hence the name, with names such as the adventurer, advocate, architect, that offer us insight into the user's strengths and weaknesses, romantic relationships, friendships, parenthood, and workplace habits. Information that is incredibly valuable to the overall makeup of the person that you are working with. Next up is Clifton Strengths. This test takes a little bit longer, coming in around 45 minutes. Could be longer, could be shorter, depending on how quickly you move through the questions. To review and answer 177 paired statements that determine natural patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. Once completed, you will receive a list of 5 themes and personalized insights out of 34, which aim to provide insight into what you naturally do best, how to best develop your greatest talents, and customize results that encourage the user to live their best life. Utilizing the information, you're able to help yourself, your team, and your organization maximize your talents and lead to optimal results, regardless of the situation. But how do these work together? How do we get to the part that combines the two, and how do we apply it to real life? I'd like to take you through a story, one that reflects how looking at the art of interaction with the science of who people are enabled me to maneuver a complex situation to come out successful on the other side. Names have been changed to protect the identity of all involved. This is a story of a new team member I had join my team. Let's call her Sarah. We were similar in age, but in a different department. We had the same number of years of work experience and seemed to get along well right out of the gate. I knew this was my perfect opportunity to figure out how we could best be a team and work together. Being that she was new, I approached the situation slightly different in that I wanted her to get settled after being the new person before really reviewing her interactions with others. You know how it goes. You get started at a new job, everything is great. You're not exactly 100% yourself right off the bat. With that, I asked Sarah to do what she could in that moment, complete the Myers-Briggs personality test. I then took this information and kept it in my trusty desk drawer until I was ready to review it. After a few months of working together, the honeymoon was over, and while we still got along well, you could sense a disconnect of what needed to get done for the projects versus what was produced. It was a bit chaotic and nobody was winning. The opportunity to review Sarah's personality test and couple it with what I had learned of her over the course of her time with the company was a natural next step in figuring out this working relationship. Here's what I knew. Sarah relished in outward acknowledgement. She was a great communicator via email, but struggled a bit in person. She had a tendency to become distant if we had her working on a project with a large team, and struggled with the opinions of others if they were different than her own. From there, I reviewed the results and found out she was an INTJ type personality, according to her Myers-Briggs personality test. After some research, I learned that based on her personality type, she might prefer working independently or with a small team, and that a typical tendency of this personality was to have frictions with team members with different perspectives. Bingo. This was spot on to what I had seen. So armed with this information, I sent her an email starting with the recognition of the work she was doing, reiterated how much I enjoyed having her on the team. This was the acknowledgement that she enjoyed. From there, I stated that I had noticed that working on or with large teams seemed to appear difficult for her, and suggested that she might be more comfortable in a smaller team, one that she could lead and have more of an impact with. At the end of it, I asked her, when she was ready, to come sit with me and discuss how we could move forward. And it worked. It took her a couple of days, but by letting her know I would be available on her terms in a way that I knew she responded well to, we were then able to have a conversation that was meaningful and straightforward, but based in understanding and solution. In taking the insights of my observations and the test, we were able to iron out some of the issues she was having, develop a plan of action, and get the project back on track. Although I no longer work with her, during the remainder of my time with the company, we got along great. I continued to observe and react to her in a way that met her where she was most comfortable, and if there was a hurdle to cross, I was equipped with the knowledge of how to navigate it so that the entire team came out ahead. Her situation and my experience with it remains a constant reminder of how I continue to recognize the delicate balance those around me need to be successful in their own role. No two people or situations are the same, but knowing the information about them allows me to be a better people manager than I ever thought possible. So now it's your turn. Time for you to take action. How can you take these items back to your team and find new ways to better work with them in the way that they'll respond best? First, pay attention. Watch your team. Monitor how they engage with others and with you, but also their demeanor in response to the way they are interacted with. Does someone raising their voice put them on the defensive? Do they shine when recognized in a room full of their peers? How often do they need to take a personal day for a mental health break? Asking yourself questions like these forces you to look deeper and adapt your own engagement with them to ensure positive interactions, even when it comes to tough subjects. Second, encourage your team to take a personality test. It doesn't have to be the ones I've highlighted here today, just ones that will give you some insight. Then use what you see from monitoring them in their element and combine it with what they tell you through these tests. What is their personality type? Are they independent and determined, and therefore they don't need a lot of guidance from you and will likely be annoyed if you give them too much direction? Use this information to meet them on their turf without having to ask them where their turf is. Third, remember this. People are complicated. Once more, we are complicated. No two people respond exactly the same to the individual aspects, let alone a combination of them based on their personality type, even if it says the two are the same. At the core, people need to be communicated with, recognized, understood, acknowledged. That list goes on and on. And it is our job as managers to recognize the necessity of adapting ourselves to who they are in order to be able to best support them in their element. Finally, don't assume that this is going to give you all the answers. Be flexible and adapt. And if that doesn't work, be more flexible and adapt some more. With both the art and the science, while the approach can be different, the principle is all the same. If you can find a way to navigate them based on the individuals and teams you're working with, I'm confident you will ensure the longevity of that team member, their work, and ultimately your clients for years to come. Thank you.
We have some questions that came in.
Great.
I'm here for this. I have some questions myself, so I might just jump in with a few.
Okay.
So just with respect to your approach that you outlined, does your approach differ if you're managing up or managing a team? So if you are like managing a project team versus managing to leadership, does that approach change in any way?
You know, that's a great question. And I honestly don't think it does. I think at the basis, we are human first. We're people first, regardless of whether you're in a situation, a position of leadership, or you are being a manager to a team. I think it's important at the core to recognize who an individual is, how they operate, you know, from a managing up perspective. Are you hearing that somebody is vocal, they like to be heard? You know, how do they respond to criticism or feedback versus managing a team and looking for those same characteristics. So I don't think that it matters if you're managing a team, managing up, managing your personal life. It's really about remembering that there are two aspects to this approach. There's who we are as individuals and how they like to be interacted with. So the science and the art, and just recognizing that and applying it to every aspect of in one's life.
Awesome. By the way, I'm an ENFP campaigner, so I expect my quality of life at work to get a little bit better, Janice. Okay, here we go. Have you ever run across coworkers that resist taking one of the personality tests when you approach them? If so, how would you recommend planning for that initial conversation? This is a great question.
That is a fantastic question. I have been fortunate that I have not run into anyone, into any personnel who has not wanted to take the test. I think there's something exciting about finding out what a test tells you about yourself. And I think that in my experience, I've seen that same excitement that I share. I would say that if you came across somebody who is hesitant or doesn't necessarily want to take a test for whatever reason they might have, encourage them to approach the situation in however they work best. That's part of the empathy, right? We're here talking about how managing people is both an art and a science. And if someone tells you something, if they're saying, hey, maybe I don't work well in this manner, or maybe it might take me longer to get to this place where I want to take a test. Great, I hear you. Thank you so much for that, for being honest with me. I'd love for you to take that test when you're ready, if that day ever comes. Otherwise, you know, if there's anything that I can do to help make working here easier, if there's anything that I can do better, please just let me know, because I don't necessarily have results from a test to tell me what that scientific aspect might be.
Oh my goodness. I think I've heard that you say that to me 2-3 times. So here we go. So what is your go-to personality test system? Conversely, are there any systems you had less success with that you'd recommend we avoid?
There's so many, and they all tell you different things, all of which, depending on how you're looking to interpret them and how you're interacting with people, can be incredibly valuable. So I would say there really aren't any that are not great or that I wouldn't recommend looking at. They're all going to derive some sort of insight of an individual that can be of value to you as somebody who's managing people. I personally like Clifton Strengths and Myers-Briggs. They're the two that I've used the most throughout my career. They offer me a lot of really great insight, not only into just high level categories, whether it be the name of your personality type, but also specifics into how a person might work or how you might be able to work with them. So those are my favorites, but like I said, there's so many, and I've yet to come across one that is like, better not.
You know, a point of personal privilege, since I MC these webinars, I do want to say I did the Strengths Finder with the project management team at Atten, even though I'm not on the PM team, and I found the exercise itself to be really helpful. Just like, you know, we did the exercise and then we had a conversation, and it gave me some insight into my colleagues that I hadn't had before, even though I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a personality test expert. I have a question, another question here that is not, I swear, not from @HR. How do you utilize the knowledge of your own personality characteristics to monitor your own workplace behavior?
Oh, that is a great question. You know, I think we all know ourselves best, right? So we know how we work, how we don't work, how we like to be worked with. So for me, for myself, in my own experience, I'm very self-aware in those different aspects, typically situational based on who I'm interacting with. So, you know, if I recognize that somebody isn't collaborating with me in a way that works best, maybe I'm posing more questions or trying to derive more insights, gaining some understanding to make sure that we're on the same page. Or, you know, if I don't typically like, you know, outward expression. So if somebody's like, hey, you know, employee of the month, I'm like, great, maybe next time, like, let's just grab coffee and you can share with me some of that feedback that you have rather than putting me on some sort of spot. So very self-aware, understanding how I like to be managed and worked with, and just being vocal. You know, not everyone that I work with understands this subject from the situation like I do. So just being vocal and communicating with them and guiding them to how I work best, being a partner in collaborating and making sure that we're approaching that in the best way possible.
Oh, I have a question just came in, and it's going to supplant the question I have, which is how have you seen things change around people management now that many companies are primarily working remotely? And my understanding is that many companies will continue to work remotely after the pandemic is over. So this is a really pertinent question.
Absolutely. No, that's a great question. I think the personal aspect is a little bit removed. We're all virtual. We're all staring at each other from a video screen, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever your schedule might be. So I think there's almost an overcompensation that has to be taken to make sure that you're putting the personal aspect back into it. Those artistic items that I mentioned, compassion, understanding, empathy. I think there's a lot to be said about being in a room with somebody and feeling those things versus seeing somebody on a camera and only, you know, seeing them. So I think that it requires a more effort on a manager's perspective to make sure that you're going above and beyond, making sure that anyone on your team feels heard, answering questions, making sure that everyone is aware of the situation on projects or with the company. So just really, I don't like to use the word overcompensating, but really making an additional effort to represent those artistic aspects of being human.
And on like a tactical level, just from the outside looking in, Janice, I think that one thing I've seen working with you and the rest of the project management team is that we've been using Slack pretty extensively for like Trivia Tuesdays, where you learn about your colleagues, and like Would You Rather Wednesdays in random. So like we just have a fun conversation about would you rather be as big as a redwood or small as a man. It just becomes silly. But it's that sort of camaraderie that you get around the coffee. And then, of course, your bingo Fridays is super fun, and I ripped it off for DrupalCon. It was so much fun. So I think from a tactical level, you and the PM team are doing a tremendous amount. I have a question about just, you know, we rarely ever just sort of parachute into our role and everything is 100% perfect, and then we can hit the ground running with understanding our colleagues. Walk me through like how you would back out of a poor communication and course correct.
Sure. I think recognizing your own fault in a situation, there's the phrase it takes two. So, if there is a conflict, diving into your own self and figuring out what might you have done better, what might you have done incorrect based off of the way that you know that this person works best, owning it, apologizing, being self-aware, recognizing how you approach the situation and calling out that you recognize where you did wrong, where you could have done better, and then devising a plan together. Say, hey, this situation was really terrible, and it could have gone a lot better. In the future, if we have this same hurdle or something similar, let's plan to connect on the side and make sure that you and I are on the same page so that things don't blow up. So I would say at the core, just recognizing fault and then devising a plan, understanding that there is a way to be better, how to be better, and then moving forward and trying to make it better in the future.
Oh, a question just came in. You talked about the science and art of people management. Do you have any specific examples that explain the art side in more real world terms? So I guess maybe a tactical meat and potatoes example.
Absolutely. So I would say an example that comes to mind, empathy and understanding. These are so tougher subject for some people. Really putting yourself in someone else's shoes, understanding what they might be going through. I think when it comes, in this situation, when it comes to business and our projects, as a project manager, I'm focused on the end goal and getting my project done. But part of that is making sure that I have empathy and understanding and compassion for my team members. So an example of this, we are in the middle of a pandemic. We have a very strange, outward thing going on. And, there was a lot of issue. There was a lot of struggle in the onset with how people were coping and how people were managing their schedules and managing children. So in the situation that comes to mind, we have a deadline for a project and people are struggling with the situation that's happening. So just being there for my colleagues and understanding that this is still, as important as the project is, if I can sit here in this moment and have a little bit of compassion for what my colleague was going through, it only made them work harder coming out of their funk, if you will, to hit the mark. So hopefully that answers your question without getting too terribly specific with calling out specific individuals.
Well, I am nowhere near Janice's level of people management skills. I do know that from a sales perspective, we never really argue, or we're never really asking for the thing that we're arguing about. We're really asking for something more fundamental. And so ultimately, when we're talking about doing good work, we want to, there's a certain amount of, and I'm talking exclusively about the art part because that was the question. But as Simon Sinek in his book Start With Why said, the part of our brain that's connected to language is not connected to the part of the brain where we make decisions. And so oftentimes when we're arguing with one another, we're just sort of rationalizing what we're mad about. Yeah. And so it's really important to understand the fundamental behind it. And that's what I think the personality tests really, really just sort of give us a shortcut in that sense. And I really appreciate this talk. Janice, I've got so many more questions for you after this. Clear your calendar next week. Janice, I want to say thank you so much for doing this, for the lightning talk, the closing out DrupalCon.